I'll go. I'm Katie, pronounced she, her. My dad was actually an eighth grade American history teacher, so I grew up with a lot of family vacations going to like, here's this famous hole in the side of the road thing, and kind of going, yeah, dad, whatever, sort of thing. But in this time, as we're all trying to, I think, learn to be better allies, I think it's important to be allies for everybody. Not, I mean, obviously the Black community is the one that's suffering right now, but I think anytime you can take opportunities to learn about other cultures, it's important. And sometimes it seems like the Native American culture is one that's kind of left out. So I'm just interested to learn what I can, even though I haven't read the book yet, because I just found out about this like a day or two ago. So
Welcome.
Well, I'll go next. I'm Chloe, she, her, hers. And I know most everybody except Katie. I don't think we've met. And I just really thought this would be fascinating. I have to be very honest, I'm not very far into the book, but it's a quick read, so I think I'll finish it maybe by the next one.
I'll go. I'm Patsy Farmer, she, her, and hers, and I probably would have signed up for it anyway because I am relatively recently retired and just reveling and having time to enjoy things that I didn't for many years. But I also have been, one of my little projects that I had been waiting patiently to start was going through old family photos and that sort of thing. And I have found out a little bit about a great grandmother who was Native American.
oh,
And some homestead information about my dad's family, her side. And so it's just very interesting to me to kind of figure out what was going on in that little part of Alabama and how she might have gotten there and that kind of thing. So
cool, interesting. Well, I'll go next. I'm Kate. I used to be a Katie, but now I'm Kate. And I did go to the first session we had, but please don't quiz me on it. So I thought, well, I'll finish this book in another week and then I'll be ready. But alas, I haven't picked it up in a very long time. So but I really enjoyed the session that we had. I've always been interested in Native cultures, and probably because my mother was very interested and enhanced our appreciation of when we traveled west to visit relatives. We went to quite a few other Western Native American cultures and places, especially the Navajo and the Hopi, but Zuni. She was also, my mother was a basket maker and was in the Foothills Guild and took lessons. She mostly made East Tennessee baskets, but she learned how to make Cherokee style baskets with a woman who became a very good friend of hers from Cherokee, North Carolina. She was always very careful to say they're Cherokee style baskets because I'm not a Cherokee. She was very appreciative of Native cultures, and I subsequently have become. But this book has opened my eyes to a lot of issues that I had not a clue about before, even though they're being quite a bit exposed. So I am enjoying it, and I will get back to it. So thank you for doing this for us.
Go next. I've not read it yet myself either, but it's been a book on my list for some time because I too have had a long term 40 something year interest in knowing more about Native culture. And as Katie was saying earlier, I think we need to know more about it. I did read Howard Zinn's The U.S. Peoples History of the United States, and that was very enlightening. So I know this is going to be just as much so. And years ago, I worked in a psychiatric facility that was actually started by Chris Bites' mom.
Oh.
And it was based on the Native American medicine wheel philosophy. So that's where my interest started, and it has actually remained a part of my own spiritual practice of paying attention to the seasons and noticing what animals trying to get my attention and understanding animal medicine. And I know that's generalized to Native Americans, that not all nations have those kind of practices. But anyway, I just want to, I want to know more. I want to know more.
Well, I'll go next. So I'm Devin Alley, pronouns they, theirs, she, hers, doesn't, it's fine. But I found out about this through the Facebook invite, and I was like, this is a book that I've been meaning to read. And now if there's going to be a discussion about it, I'll probably actually read it. I decided that that was kind of why I decided to pick it up. And I'm about 30%, according to my Kindle app, I'm 30% through. The reason that I wanted to dive into it right now is because because of COVID, I'm in this situation where I'm homeschooling my kids. And I've got 2 young daughters, ages 6 and 3. And I've been, I started going through like the curriculum that Knox County suggests in social studies and such for your first graders. And I was just like, I have conflicting feelings about some of these things, citizenship. And I was like, I want to teach this, but in a way that I feel is accurate. And so this is one of the resources I thought would be good for me to be better informed, to teach them. So that's kind of like the burning reason, but also just wanting to be a better ally, be better informed. I felt like it was a good book to read, and I have not been disappointed. So.
Forgot to say my pronouns, she and her. And I also forgot to say the son that we adopted is part Cherokee.
Oh.
So another reason.
Yes. Yes.
Gordon and Judy, you will be the last. So we're just doing introductions, what brought you here, pronouns, and the such.
Okay. I'm Gordon, he, him, his, pronouns. In college, I was a history major. This was not part of the curriculum. I got some different angles on the events described, but not this perspective. And it really is important to get the corrective. I did get to the initial session, and I read the big fat adult version, which I think maybe doesn't have some of the good maps and charts and visual
Correct.
that the young adult version. But looking forward to being part of continuing discussion.
And I'm Judy Gibson, and she, her are my pronouns. And I only started digging into the adult version and decided I wanted to use the young people's version because it really does, well, for a couple of reasons. And I can't remember the context, but we were in a meeting not a few months ago that actually had Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz there.
Oh.
And she talked about this book and said, well, in some ways, I think it's even better than what I wrote. And I thought, well, I'll tell you what, I think maybe this is what I want to get through. So I have borrowed it from the Children's Diversity and Justice Library.
Very good.
And am digging into it with, I started from the beginning again, and am struck, even in the very beginning things, with the view of the indigenous peoples that was totally missing from any history that I was ever taught. Somehow the manifest destiny and the settlers, the colonialists who would make everybody's life better, that very much in the history. And probably it still is in almost all the schools. And I noticed that our current president has a great fear that any awareness of this kind of thing is going to make people hate our country. Yeah. And feel bad about how we've developed. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, it happened. We're living with a country that has been settled by Europeans, and now we've got lots of immigrants in. But it gives us a perspective. It doesn't make us hate our history. It's just so black and white kind of, well, if I can use those terms, way of looking at. Either you take the history we were taught in our school, or this awful other stuff, that makes us hate our history. I don't think that's the case. And I'm really looking forward to digging into this further.
Thanks, everybody. I'm glad you're here. Judy Gordon, you missed this announcement. We will go over 2 parts from the first session, just briefly, just because it was another world at that point. So
I don't remember what we talked about.
I was there, and I don't remember either.
Well, and also bear with me tonight. I'm flying a little bit blind. Something's going on with my computer where I'm not getting any words underneath anything. So I'm glad all of you said your names because I'm not seeing any of them.
So, but then you know us all.
Yeah, well, for the most part. So, but I'm going to go over our covenant real quick. It's basically the one that we used from. Well, I'll go for the goals first. Can everyone see this? Do I need to enlarge it?
I see what you did. Yeah.
You can see? Okay, everyone can see it. Okay, so the goals of this course would be to provide a framework for people to respond to Indigenous peoples' history, and then invite participants to explore the colonialization and settlement of Indigenous lands and expansion of the U.S. at the expense of those people, to build an awareness of Indigenous resistance to colonization and current work to assert sovereignty, and explore responsive actions our Unitarian Universalist faith requires of us. So, and then, like I said, these are the covenants that we came up the first time, and it's pretty straightforward as far as anyone who's been in a Unitarian Universalist meeting. But if y'all don't mind, let's go around the room and just, Katie, do you go to the church? You're the only one I'm not 100% sure about.
No.
Okay. Just, these are basically a cover. If there's any questions, something that I'm not explaining that might be germane to Unitarian Universalism, just please feel free to speak up. But
Okay.
these are just some, I don't like the term code of conduct, but just some common guidelines about just the experience of being in this discussion. So, and so I will start off. We each promise to speak from our own experiences and perspectives.
Listen generously to the experiences and perspectives of others.
Resist making assumptions about one another.
Be mindful of taking space and making space so that all have opportunities to speak and listen.
Respect the confidentiality of others' sharing.
Expect and accept that questions may linger.
Thanks, everyone. So are those okay with everyone as far as just guidelines?
Those sound like good guidelines regardless of what your faith is.
Yes.
They're good for, I mean, we used them in other meetings, like with some of my other jobs, and it's a good guideline to follow. So, and this may be something else that's a little bit new to you, Katie, but it's with Unitarian Universalists. One of the ways we open some of our meetings and discussions is with a chalice lighting, and the chalice is the symbol of our faith, and it just kind of helps set kind of sacred space and tone. And so, let's see, how do I want to work this? We'll do it this way. So, Woody Guthrie's "This Land is Your Land" celebrates that the land belongs to everyone, reflecting the unconscious manifest destiny we live with. But the extension of the United States from sea to shining sea was the intention and design of the country's founders. Free land was the magnet that attracted European settlers. So this land is your land. I didn't really start thinking about it this way until actually after reading the book, that, I mean, it is, manifest destiny is tied up in that song, and a lot of songs that are ingrained in our society and fabric of our country. And more than one of our Unitarian Universalist hymns does as well. I would have somebody at this point read the third verse from Give Thanks, but that was one of the casualties so far of my computer this evening. So I will read you the third verse of Give Thanks. Give thanks for the homes that with kindness are blessed, for seasons of plenty and well-deserved rest, for our country extending from sea unto sea, for ways that have made it a land for the free. Very similar sentiments. And then y'all can sing along with this one. I will probably not, just spare you. But this is another one from our hymnal, and the lyrics will be up on the screen. So
where the oil of gladness falls on morning, will build the promised land that can be. Come, sisters and brothers, anointed by God, and create peace where justice and peace like an end.
let me get out of this and get back to the full screen. But you can see there's some very similar ideas that are talked about in both those songs that are also in Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land." This is from the Unitarian Universalist Assembly in 2007. The Reverend Danielle DeBona began the session by describing her initial experience in Seattle. She's one of our well-known ministers. She had attended the service of the Living Tradition, and the program included the hymn, "We'll Build the Land." When DeBona, a Wampanoag Indian, saw hundreds of mostly white faces in the hall singing this,
She thought about how white European culture indeed had built on Native American land. Knowing all this was done at the expense of Native culture caused her great pain. And for those of you who don't know, the Wampanoags, that's up in the Providence area where settlers first came across. DeBona shared these feelings with Keith Arnold, who had helped plan the service. Arnold, who was president of the Unitarian Universalist Musicians Network, initially replied that he would never sing the song again. But DeBona assured him that he could, now that she had been heard. Arnold told the attendees he will always remember her story when he sings it. This experience has changed how he thinks of this song, he said, using other ears. Just now, take a moment just to consider some of our other U.S. patriotic songs and name some of the lyrics that you think might uphold that manifest destiny narrative.
God bless America. Some phrases in it.
This land is made for you and me, probably.
Yeah.
Especially like just the idea of this land is made for you and me. Well, which you and which me? Basically, white people have decided which you and which me.
Yeah.
Think of the songs we've got.
I don't know which song this is from, but from I have it in my head, but I can't get it out. Sorry.
Know that one, Angela.
Yeah, I was sitting there going, da, 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 and I was like trying to think of the actual words.
And I even have the words. But I can't.
I can't think of all the words, but oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves.
Oh, waves of grain.
Yep.
Purple Mountain's majesty above the fruited plain.
America, God bless.
Shed his grace on thee.
Yes.
From sea to shining sea, there we are. Again, of course, that's talking about, but it's not thinking about, it's not thinking about the native peoples. It's thinking about all of us who came and started planting our grain.
Yes.
And God shed his grace on thee. That was the phrase.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who is thee? Who is thee?
And of course, the most militaristic of all, the Star-Spangled Banner, which does not refer directly to native cultures, but it is, aren't we, to me, it's always been, you know, well, we got this wonderful country because we shot our way into, you know, we got rid of the enemies and bombed everybody, and but there's the flag.
Yeah.
Oh, and it was free land too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Free land. What does that mean?
Right.
That's
Right.
totally different.
Well, and kind of what gets me, whether it be these songs or certain holidays that we have, like, they've sort of become just an excuse, I think, for people to like party or have the day off. Like most of the time, you're not even really talking about like what the purpose of that day is. Like whether you agree or disagree with what the day represents, like most people are not using it as the day to actually like talk about whether it be a person or like 4th of July or whatever. It's just an excuse so much, I think, for people to go and act stupid.
Or put on a sale.
Put on it. That's what I was about to say, is go get something on sale.
Yep.
Coats. Oh, we all need coats on Columbus Day. And why do we have Columbus Day anyway? Anyway.
Well, I just lit the chalice. I just invite all of you to take a breath, and as we go through this module and next week's and just some of the stuff we talk about, just, I mean, think about just the different themes that we've been taught, who taught us, whose voices we've heard, and just willingness to change how you think about this land and how the United States was formed. So, U.S. American exceptionalism, something I think most of us have heard about growing up. What are some of the common stories and patriotic themes associated with the founding of the United States and its current greatness as a nation? Think about how these, I mean, we've also thought about how they're found in patriotic songs, but there's also political speeches or civic events.
Well, Thanksgiving, because it's coming up.
Yes,
All
yes.
learn the Pilgrims and the Indians, and
So on that note, I was talking earlier when just a few of us were here that I looked up the Native nations that where I'm living now currently in Holston Hills, who were here first. Of course, I knew about the Cherokee, but I didn't know about the Yuchi because they have almost, their history has been almost obliterated. And written by the same person is a story about Thanksgiving, which of course is nothing like the Thanksgiving that we've been told.
Right.
And there was one Native American particularly who had been enslaved twice by the English. And when the English up in Massachusetts were sick and didn't have enough food because they didn't know how to grow it in this soil, this one individual whose name escapes me at the time, but I can send you the article if you want it. He's the one that reached out to them, not the other way around. And it had been a harvesting festival that the tribes had done for years.
yeah.
You know, it wasn't a peacemaking. I mean, it was anyway. So it was very interesting to read the real truth about it.
I think in general, I feel like with all of our history, it's kind of like, well, there was conflict between us and this other group, and then eventually that conflict went away, and now all is good. It's like, and that's a very simplification of anything, because obviously stuff's not all good. It's good for us of privilege, but it's not good for other people that are still having to suffer, you know, the emotional consequences of it, or don't have the ability, you know, have the resources to just even be able to live a pretty like basic needs and be able to pay for like food and housing and just all the basic needs of life.
How about we are a nation of immigrants?
Do you want to get us started on that, really?
Has anybody told Trump that? Or his followers?
Yeah.
One of the ones that I think this goes back, I guess this goes back to Bush 1 or 2, I'm not sure, but we are an exceptional nation, a city on a hill, a shining light, an example for the world.
That sounds like Bush Senior with his
Yeah.
points of light.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was, but I'm not, don't hold me to that one. So.
The city on the hill was, I think, copied from one of the early message settlers who used that in an early address. Yeah, it goes on and on.
So, United States exceptionalism is a common theme expressed in any number of metaphors and phrases. The book and author adapters tell us that the story of the U.S. exceptionalism is used to justify or render invisible the colonization of the land and the harm done to indigenous peoples who were here when the Europeans arrived. The United States, this is a quote, these are quotes from the book right here. The United States is not unique among nations in forging an origin myth, but most of its citizens believe it to be exceptional among nation states. And this exceptionalist ideology has been used to justify appropriation of the continent and the domination of the rest of the world. Patriotic U.S. politicians and citizens take pride in exceptionalism. Historians and legal theorists characterize the statecraft and empire as those of a nation of laws, rather than one dominated by a particular class or group of interests, suggesting a kind of holiness. I've got a couple of questions to consider here as soon as I can share my screen again.
I apologize. I'm going to have to step in and out some.
That's okay. All right. So once again, can everyone see these?
Yep.
The pictures are over part of the text. I don't know if that's, I don't know enough about.
It's not covering up this particular text. It was covering up part of the lyrics to the song, and I didn't realize until halfway through. But this one is it's not covering. It's only covering up the toolbar.
A little bit. Okay. All right.
And we'll go around and we'll each read one. Well, four of us will read one, and I'll start off. Were you taught that the United States is an exceptional country ordained for some kind of exceptional purpose?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that I was ever taught purpose, but I feel like I've always heard, well, we're the best country in the world, and everybody sort of, in times of crisis, looks to us first. And I've always wondered, like, who deemed us that? Like, did we give ourselves that title, or where did that idea come from?
That's a good question. I mean,
it is a good question.
I mean, it can probably be traced back to just the whole idea of manifest destiny, that, I mean, it's what was ingrained, that this is just, our purpose was to, I mean, be the leader in the world. And that's what we taught ourselves. At least that's my thought about it.
Shall we go on with the next question?
Yeah, I was actually going to say, let's go through all the questions and then people can chime in as they want to.
Okay. Have there been events that convinced you of U.S. American exceptionalism? Have there been events you witnessed or learned about that have convinced you otherwise?
Devin, you want to take the third one?
Sure. What has U.S. American exceptionalism meant to Indigenous peoples in this land? What examples can you offer from your reading of the book?
How is exceptionalist ideology a tool that allows and has allowed European Americans to act in ways that might objectively seem ethically wrong or suspect, while still considering themselves good people?
And I know it says, what examples can you offer from your reading of the book? But that can be just your experience in general. And I will leave those up.
Well, my response to the second question, the second part of the second question, is I would say certainly almost every event or every happening with the current administration, almost past administration, it really convinced me that we were not very exceptional as we pronounce ourselves to be, speaking from just embarrassment after embarrassment, and dropping out of world organizations and caring about other countries. And to me, that's not a sense of exceptionalism. So I guess I didn't think about it much until this current administration.
Yeah, this current administration has drawn back the curtain on a lot.
Yeah.
Well, if I look at the second bullet point there, and I look at my life, the events that convinced me of American exceptionalism, except I never coined that phrase in my mind, in my head, but the U.S. people going into World War I and then being drawn into World War II was quite a let's say a gift for the rest of the world in the time, because we thought we were isolated and we wouldn't really be impacted by those two wars. A lot of people thought that. But then if I look at the end of World War II, the United States was incredibly wealthy. It's difficult to comprehend the wealth that we had at the end of World War II. And we turned around and we gave that wealth away, particularly to Western Europe. That, I think a lot of people felt that was a sense of exceptionalism. A lot of people fault us for doing that too.
I wonder, that's an interesting point, Edgar, and as you talk about that, I was not thinking about it until now, but our wealth going to various countries abroad, how would that feel if you were an indigenous person?
Yes, I understand, yes.
Yeah, hey, they gave us land and then they kept taking it away, and we're in really desperate straits, and you know, they're not giving us much.
Right.
I don't know. That's a question that I'm thinking about now.
Yeah, that leads into the third question, and obviously, I can't imagine that any indigenous peoples would not have felt very wronged, and then pretty much invisible.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like they're not even here now,
Right.
Unless you know somebody personally.
Correct.
I guess to kind of piggyback off of, I think what Kate said with number 2 is, I mean, yes, even though Biden and Harris, yay, president-elect and vice president-elect, but still think about how many people voted still for Trump and
Yes.
and have no problem with what his very racist, sexist, homophobic, all these different things are. And then the people who, like, on a more local level, like Saturday, I think it was, I saw where the News Sentinel was asking some of the senators and representatives kind of their thought on the election, and how many of them went along with what Trump was saying about the legal vote. So it's like, it's not just, I mean, yes, we're getting Trump out of the office, but that doesn't solve the problem that there's still people who, like, I was on a thing earlier where they were talking about how, okay, you have millions of people dying, there's a whole group of people that don't care. A whole bunch of people being, you know, can't afford basic stuff. Nobody, like, what does it take as a country for us to care? Because you would think by now we would have, but obviously not. So, but obviously history shows us, because we killed a whole bunch of Native Americans, we didn't care then, and we really haven't changed.
True.
And I would think that I mean, I can't say this for 100% for sure, because I don't know all of European history, but I feel like for somewhat, at least European history, like certain parts of it are admitted, like they know it happened, they acknowledged it happened, even the bad stuff. Whereas I feel like we acknowledge a very small part of the bad stuff and then just kind of wipe it under the rug.
Yeah. One of the places that turns up is in national parks. And the National Park Service is trying to work on this. A year or so ago, we drove much of the length of the Natchez Trace Parkway, which traverses lands that had been the home of several tribes, several nations, and
Wasn't the Natchez Trace actually a native road?
Much of it started.
Much of it.
There are numerous interpretive sites along that road now, where additional materials have been placed, created by members of the Natchez or Choctaw or other nations to give their understanding of what this site meant to their ancestors, not to Andrew Jackson, who used the trace, not to white settlers, but to them, to the people who were originally there. And I guess work is still underway at some place like, I think the name is still Custer's Battlefield. Well, Custer didn't leave that battlefield in very good shape. Maybe it should be Sitting Bull Battlefield if you're going to put a person's name on it.
I thought it was called Little Bighorn.
And I remember when we visited it many years ago, I thought, okay, there are a few display panels giving Native American version of events. Really, almost all of them should be two-sided. This is what the 7th Cavalry thought. Other side, this is what the Sioux Nation thought. Very different version of history there.
Right.
Can someone real quick tell me, so I don't have to switch off of this, is there anything I'm missing in chat? Because I can't access it in the screen that I'm at.
You're good.
Okay. All right. I didn't know, because I keep on getting a flashing light. Just want to make sure that I wasn't missing somebody's question.
Yeah, Mark, that was from me. I just wanted to let you know that Sina Buchanan had joined us. That's Daniel and Cindy's daughter. But she left.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Thank you for letting me know. So I know that Catherine had tried to get some of the youth to come. So I just wanted to make sure that, because every time I tried to click on the flashing light, it would disappear before I could check what the chat said. So it's like I said, it's a little bit of technical challenge tonight, but I think we're making it pretty well. But
she might have thought she was maybe hoping for more kids.
Yeah.
One comment I would make about exceptionalism is I try to wonder what the Native Americans feel and thought. But I have one comment I would make is that I've had some very good friends, relatives that turn on me in an instant when I make a comment about perhaps we should think about the downtrodden, perhaps we should think about the people that are of lower class that are having a hard time, not just during the COVID, but for many years. And I'm turned on very quickly with the phrase, "You're not one of those bleeding hearts, are you?"
Yes.
And it's a pretty sharp comment. It's, you can hear it, a politician make that phrase or something and think of them as mean-spirited, but to hear your neighbors and your friends and your relatives turn on you like that, and I walk away wondering really what's going on in their heads. I guess they believe in exceptionalism and they don't really even think about it.
There's,
I think a lot of people have bought into the fact, well, bought into the idea that's not true, but that those things really didn't exist, and everything, even if they did in the past, everything is great now. And they don't want to give that up because it means they need to do some hard thinking.
Yeah, I agree with you, Patsy. And I feel like this has kind of opened my eyes to just how reading this book so far has been like, God, this is our relationship with our greater culture, the culture that shaped our country, is like such a textbook abusive relationship, right? And like, there's those of us who have been like, okay, we see the light, we're leaving, we're shutting the door, we're never coming back. And then there's like so many people who have no idea that they're just like, oh, I fell down some economic stairs. That's obviously why I'm in this situation. And they're not, equipped yet to have the strength. And I think some of it is guilt. And I think some of it is, just not allowing themselves to be aware. But I think that's part of it's a denial. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it. I had a really interesting conversation with my father-in-law, who I love so much, but he's, conservative. He's not a Trump supporter, but, he's definitely not a Biden supporter. And so he and I have very different opinions about a lot of things. And his whole point, or his whole conversation with me, was, why is everybody saying that, if you support Trump, you're automatically a racist? He's like, back whenever I was a kid, this is what racism was, and people aren't doing that. So what's now if you don't, how is it that I'm sitting here being racist? And so it was like having to have this very delicate conversation about, there's a whole history here. There's a whole, culture that you're enmeshed in, and, people are angry and upset, and it's so, but somebody on the other end is getting angry and upset because they feel like they're being attacked, because they don't understand, like, there's this whole culture that all of us have shared into or have been affected by in some way. And I don't know, I just thought it was really interesting, and I'm grateful that this book has given me a framework to, I think, be more empathetic with people who are on the other side of things too. Because I can be like, oh wait, no, we've all been brainwashed for centuries. And so now that helps me, I think, come to it a little bit differently.
I don't know if anybody else has had this feeling, but so I work for the University of Tennessee, and our chancellor does these like daily or twice a week daily updates as far as how we're doing with COVID and stuff. And she'll always talk about us being the volunteer states. And there's a part of me every time I hear that sort of cringes now, because it makes it seem like we are a lot better than we really are. And it's like, because when you think of volunteers, you think of people, and not to say there aren't people stepping up right now, but you think of people stepping up like when it's uncomfortable, or going out of their way to make a difference and stuff. And like I said, there definitely are people during this time, but then there are so many people that aren't. And to like, every time somebody says, whether it's her or the governor or whoever, saying, because that's what volunteers do. And you're kind of going, but there's not enough of us to feel like, or at least for me to feel like we've deserved that nickname as a state.
One of the things that came to mind for me, and I guess it's another way of talking about American exceptionalism, is something that has been ingrained in this country. It's even very much ingrained in our denomination, is rugged individualism. And pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. I mean, that if you're not making it, then it's your fault, and that no one can tell me how to live my life. I'm finding my own way and stuff like that. And I believe that I'm actually getting ahead of myself, and that is talked about in the the last third of the book. But that's another thing that runs throughout our country's history, is that striking out across the land, I mean, and claiming it, and just, I mean, the early explorers of the rugged individualism. And it's very, I mean, it's not saying that there wasn't a lot of very heroic things, but it's become glamorized. Just, I mean, it's not looked at in realistic things. And just going back once again, we are certainly by no stretch of the words the only country that has romanticized its origin and stuff like that. It's just, but this is the place that we live in. And I'll get off this rant in just a second, but it's one of the things with not confronting our past, or realistically confronting our past, is I think it's where we've gotten. It's one of the reasons where we've gotten to where we are right now. We've never gone back and had some sort of reconciliation. And like you were saying, Dad, just if you tell somebody something like that we should help these people, I mean, and just, I mean, their reality is built into something that goes against that. I mean, they're going to become more and more vociferous in trying to preserve that reality, because if they don't have that, and this is true in a lot of different things, then, I mean, your worldview starts to crack, and it's standing on shifting sands, and that's not the easiest thing to do.
Mark, I got to throw in that I feel like that rugged individualism is precisely one of the reasons that a lot of people refuse to wear a mask.
Oh, yes, very definitely.
And why they want to get rid of our Board of Health.
Yeah,
I know.
I have a right to decide for myself. And there's no awareness of that. We didn't hear that when people wanted to speed down the road, did we?
No. Seat belts we did.
But people did fight seatbelts. Yes, they did.
Yes, we heard it.
When you were talking about taking responsibility, I think it was called Who Should We Invade or something. The Michael Moore movie.
Who Should We Invade Next?
Yeah. When he went to Germany, I was just beyond impressed, because the children are learning the truth about what happened and how it happened. And I thought, that was so impressive. We have never done that.
Yeah.
We've never taken we've not taken it for the indigenous. We've not taken it for the slavery, for nothing. It's like, yeah, we have every right to do what we do.
Yep.
Well, kind of what you guys were talking about, it drives me crazy, especially when people who claim to be of whatever denomination of Christian, you know, they'll claim Christianity, but then they're not willing to help people out, or they're doing the whole individual mask thing. And it's like, but being not just Christian, but any religion, at the end of the day, the details may be slightly different. But I think at the end of the day, doesn't God just want us to all love one another and respect one another? And by doing that, isn't that like seeing beyond yourself and trying to help other people? So it's like, I don't understand how these evangelical Christians, like how they see Trump as like their savior or whatever.
Sent by God. Sent by God.
Because in fact, I haven't seen it, but I think it might have been around the time of 2016 election, but somebody made like a documentary that supposedly he had heard from God that Trump was supposed to be coming and be our savior, and made like some sort of documentary.
The Trump prophecy.
Yeah. But it's just like, because doesn't that go against everything that you're supposed to believe in with God?
Right. The counterpoint to that is a cartoon, actually a photograph of a woman and Groucho Marx. The balloon above her says, "I believe that God sent Donald Trump To which Groucho says, "Why? Did he run out of locusts?"
So, well, let's move on to our next portion, and some of what we've already talked about kind of leads into it, about that this land was undiscovered, that, I mean, there was no one here, and we, I mean, yeah. So this is another quote from the book, and this has to do with terminal narratives, which I thought was a fascinating thing that I hadn't really thought about before. Historians have two primary theories to explain what allowed the Europeans to thoroughly colonize the indigenous lands in North America. One is that the indigenous peoples were overwhelmed by superior military campaigns. Another is that the indigenous populations were decimated by diseases brought by the Europeans, such as smallpox and diphtheria. These theories are sometimes called terminal narratives. The word terminal suggests that native nations and the people in them were completely wiped out by Europeans.
It does.
This is not the case. Military campaigns and disease did have a devastating impact on indigenous peoples, but efforts to exterminate them were not successful. And that's what happened. That just, well, I mean, despite 400 years of oppression and trying to actually really make sure that there weren't any indigenous here, they are still here. They still live, and some of them do thrive in the land, but those who live today are descended from the peoples who resisted that.
And they vote, and they voted.
They vote when they are allowed to vote, if they have an address. If they don't have a mailing street address, many of them were prohibited from voting, have been, still are.
But they said that there was a huge percentage that were able to, and that it helped.
In Arizona, I think the figure was claimed as 97% of the Navajo Nation vote went to Biden.
Yeah.
That may be the margin.
Well, they tried to make it not happen, but they still voted.
So I'd like to invite you to take just a couple of minutes, just in silence, to think about some of the narratives and images that of Indians and indigenous peoples that you've absorbed over your lifetime. Just what has our society taught us about indigenous peoples and native peoples that have become part of how we view that history? And as you're thinking about that, do those images, stories, and experiences that come to mind imply that Indians were a long ago people, now gone?
Yeah.
And how did those images, stories, and experiences demonstrate othering of indigenous peoples?
Can you read that last sentence again?
Yeah. How did those images, stories, and experiences demonstrate othering of indigenous people?
Othering, yes.
Does everyone know that concept?
Yeah, yeah. I just couldn't hear. I couldn't hear what you said.
Talk about othering. I guess I know, but I'm not sure.
Othering is, I mean, we do it a lot on the right and the left. I mean, I know I did it a lot when I was working for Planned Parenthood, that the people that were opposed to abortion, I mean, they were the others. They were not like me. They were not, I mean, it makes it easier for you to dismiss that person's existence.
I mean, I don't need to talk to them.
Yeah. Them and us. Them and us. Yeah.
The idea of, you know, the terminal story. My dad's family was never given to stories and that kind of thing, but I was always told that I had a Native American great-grandmother kind of concept. But there are no stories about her. There was no information about, you know, where she came from, anything like that. And it was as though that was the end. And you know, it's been fascinating to me to learn a little bit in the past few months, but it was very surprising, the whole little story that I went through, and it involved a homestead. I have a homestead certificate. And it was Martha C. Thompson, and I couldn't figure out who that was for a long time. And then I found an old photo that my dad had given me, and he'd given me the name of everybody. And that great-great-grandmother is in that photo. She was the only one with no name there. It was just great-grandmother Thompson, and then in parentheses, Indian.
Wow.
But she was actually the one, that is Martha C. She was the one that got the homestead. And so, you know, when I first saw the homestead, I kept thinking, who did we take that land from? And then when I found out it was her, I felt better. But then I found out there's a fellow that wrote a little history of the county that my dad was from. And then I found out that that this great-grandmother came from Georgia, so she was probably Cherokee, and it was the Creeks that were displaced. So she got the Creek land. So it's a very complicated story.
Wow.
But it was never, there was never, you know, never any story about it. It was like my great-great-grandmother was well, it was always said Indian, and that was the end of it. So it was very much a terminal, you know, idea in my family.
Very much other in your family.
Yeah.
Yes.
How about the last of the, oh, sorry, go on.
That cowboys and Indians was a big thing when I was a child. And the whole image there, the great cowboys who go and, you know, chase down those nasty Indians.
Right.
I know we saw movies on Saturday for
Yes.
You know, we played cowboys and Indians and played horses.
Yeah, me too.
All of that helped to shape, and I know that I really believe that the Indians aren't around anymore. You know, through my young life. Well, I guess there are a few in some place, you know, in some reservations somewhere, but not no reasonable number. You know, even to fairly recently, probably until I started getting, you know, into this.
Right.
Gordon and I attended a conference. I can't remember where we went. It was National Parks Conservation. And at that conference, there was much, it was National Park Service people talking to the supporters of the Park Service and organizations, of course, the Park Service, and others who were invited and stuff. And I remember, Gordon, and you may too, that although there was a whole lot of discussion about trying to change, as Gordon was describing, the interpretation of history in the historic sites that I think the Park Service has honestly been working on. They were talking a lot there, as I recall, about the slavery issues. But there were like 2 or 3 Native Americans in this conference who kept standing up and saying, what about the Native American, you know, you need to talk about the Native American history too. And it was almost as if it was early in the awareness time for the Park Service. And I don't remember how many years ago, but I just remember those people asking over and over, you know, we're here, we have a history, we need that interpreted too by your National Park Service, not just the slave, not putting down the slavery stories, but
ours started even earlier.
Yeah, yes.
Well, I guess this idea that, you know, we found America sort of thing, because they're probably going, yeah, we're good. Like, we were never lost sort of thing. So that would be like in modern times, somebody coming up to you and basically telling you that your feelings, your culture, your whatever, like this is the way you feel. And you're like, actually, no, I'm fine. I'm good sort of thing. So they're kind of going, no, I think you're the ones that are lost. Now, it may have been it was found to Christopher Columbus, but to Native Americans, it's like, no, we've been here a long time. So that concept too, I think, is obviously skewed.
I don't know how many of you remember we got a little, I guess everybody here on the screen looks like mostly Caucasian, but we got a little taste of that a couple of years ago, was it on Facebook? And somebody from out of state discovered this lost colony in the Smoky Mountain National Park, and there were houses and there were, you know, a big public building. Well, it was not Sugarland. Well, Sugarlands was the big house, but the Elkmont community, which, you know, is undergoing, a lot of it is being allowed to decay, and they kept a few houses. But there's this person from out of state, he discovered this, and it was on national TV, and it was sort of like a ghost town, and he discovered it. And this just kind of reminds me a little bit of, we can't ever fully know what Native cultures feel, because that's not our history. Well, one of us has an ancestor. So I just was thinking, yeah, we got discovered too. But
one of the big examples for me is just the terminal narrative is the Last of the Mohicans. I mean, just that was the end. I mean, and you have like Hiawatha with that poem, and just, I mean, going off into the distance, and just that they aren't that the noble savage died out. I mean,
the end of the trail picture.
Yes.
In this book, the kid's book. Very visual. Okay, I guess it's the end for us.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you grew up going over to Cherokee and seeing the Unto These Hills play that they still put on today from all those years ago. I don't know have any of the rest of you seen that play, Unto These Hills? But it's the true story, of course, of the Cherokee who escaped removal by running up into the mountains around, and it's their descendants who are now the current residents of the Cherokee Nation Eastern Band. And so I saw that play as a very young child, and of course I grew up with parents who were very supportive of Native causes, so my slant was a little different. But if you see that play, it does give you a sense of not having a terminal story to at least the Cherokee in this part of the country, and a very, very powerful story. And the museum is excellent over there too.
And Kate, maybe, I don't know how recently you've been over there, but that very story has its own history, as I understand it. It really still kind of had a white person's slant to it in terms of and all of the characters were played by white actors who
yes, I am aware of that. Yeah, crazy.
Somehow or another, it's now in the hands of Native Americans, and they have kind of rewritten some of the stories.
Well, I just thought of a place like there's Cherokee Country Club. So I'm thinking, how do people who like were using their name, like the name of their tribe, for a country club that is probably, I've never been there, but I'm guessing it's predominantly white.
Oh, it is entirely white, except
Yes.
for our basketball coach that was at UT briefly, and he was
Yeah,
had
and
special dispensation to be in.
Yeah, very white and very, you know, high class and all that kind of stuff. And we just took like their name, and I'm sure have done, who knows what we've done with it, but still, like, that's their term. They should be allowed to use their name for what they want, and not us taking it.
There was a story in the Sentinel just last week about Sequoia Hills and all of the native names that are used for the streets in Cherokee Boulevard, and they mentioned Cherokee Country Club. It started with just talking about the Indian mound that's in the middle of Cherokee Boulevard, if those of you run down there or walk. But apparently there were Cherokee way back in the day who lived on the banks of the river, a very small, but of course most were in North Georgia. But anyway, there were Cherokee here. This is like back in the 1700s. And so it was an interesting story. And it was originally, I guess, the names of all the streets in this new subdivision, but people didn't want to have those names originally because they thought it was kind of low class to have just Indian names. But then it kind of got, as you say, you know, we adapted those names and took them for our own. Anyway, but yeah.
We assimilated them. I mean, where my parents used to live, they used to live out in Tellico Village. And
yes.
I mean,
Yes.
every street out there is an Indian name. Carol Bedeau from over at West Side, she, like a decent amount of her congregants live out in Tellico Village, and she was like, I mean, made it a point to explain to where those names came from.
Yeah.
Interestingly, my dinner conversation was very similar to this because we were talking about the Indian mounds in Sequoia, and my roommate's son started a petition to have the jogging trail derailed
around.
And interestingly, it was the Yuchi. The Yuchi were the mound builders.
Yes.
The Cherokee.
Well, yeah, there's always a lot of dispute about what that mound, we'll probably never really know, but it had already been gone through and raided long ago. So if there were pottery or whatever, or bones, we don't know. Right. But, yeah.
Well, I'd invite you. Oh, sorry. Go on, Gordon.
No, one name that's interesting. The giant trees in California are called sequoia.
Yes. Spelled differently, but yes.
Because one of the Army officers who was an early settler in California had been very impressed during his time in this area. The Cherokee named Sequoia.
Yes.
And these magnificent trees, he knew for them. Sequoia. So
I didn't know that.
Occasionally there's a positive spin.
Well, I invite you, after reading this book and after this class, I mean, if you're comfortable, try and confront those narratives. I mean, and make sure that people realize that Native and Indigenous people are still here, and they're fighting to survive. I mean, that's the other portion of this is, I mean, a lot of people think that they're all assimilated. And so why do we need reservations and stuff like that? So, which is exactly, well, I think it was more of a spite thing, but that's what Trump tried to do to the, now drawing a blank on the tribe, but I mean, it was basically right when General Assembly was going to be taking place in Providence. They were trying to take their, I mean, it wasn't even a huge plot of land, but it was their ancestral lands, and they were going to dissolve it. So.
Well, the one question though, here we are, we're named all these names, streets, towns, parks, all kinds of things are using native names or anglicized versions.
Yeah.
I guess I would say a defender of the old narrative would say, well, what are you going to do? Change all those names, like tearing down all those monuments and stuff? I don't think what we're saying, at least I'm not hearing this, is change the names as much as learn the background or learn.
Yeah.
This is what I heard you saying, Mark, and I was, we can't, if we disappeared all those names and made everything Elm Street, well, it's going to turn out that a lot of trees are named.
Right.
I think the thing, I mean, with those monuments that have been torn down from the Civil War, those belong in a museum. I mean, and I think that we don't need to do wholesale just changing everything, but it's important, at least to me, to know your whole history. I mean, to hopefully make going into the whatever future we have together a little bit
more inclusive, well-rounded.
Yes, more inclusive, well-rounded. And you can see, I mean, there's still problems in some of these places, but like in South Africa and Rwanda, where they've had some of these truth and reconciliation, and in Germany, where they teach the history.
Yes.
That is something that we do not do. And there's a parallel I just thought of, actually, because they haven't gone through it either. But Japan, they have never really come to terms with their imperialist past, especially in regards to Korea and the women that they kidnapped there, and the rape of Nanking. And right now, with their government, they're trying to go back and rewrite their constitution into more of a right-wing leaning document, like make it to where it is a crime to criticize the government. And so there's some interesting parallels, because they, like I said, I mean, they've never really confronted their past as well, at least not, I mean, I'm not saying they haven't completely, and I mean, we've confronted some of our past, but sometimes that's just kind of an easy thing. I mean, just do a little bit of lip service, put up a couple of signs, and then we're all good.
Yeah, and I heard somebody talking about with the monuments thing, like you said, putting them in a museum so that you have to actively go there to see them, as opposed to if you're a minority group who is having to drive by, walk by that same space, you're not reminded on a daily basis. Like, you have to make an active decision that I'm going to go to this building, knowing that there's fill in the blank, monument, statue things, sort of like that. And it's like so many of the things, I think sometimes the way, whether it's the media, politicians, a little bit of both, or people just don't understand. It's like the whole defunding the police thing. Like, when you actually hear what that means, it doesn't mean stripping all the money away from the police. It means providing resources so that the proper people can help, like people with mental health conditions can get proper help instead of being arrested or potentially killed by the police. But people just hear like one phrase and go, oh my gosh, this is what they're going to do. It's like, people kill.
That is what that sounds like, though.
Yeah, I think reallocate would have been better.
Yeah, defund was a very poor choice of words.
Yeah, whoever came up with the phrase obviously should have.
Trigger word. Yes.
Have to say, Kate, because that's what a lot of us white folks are saying. But I read something that suggested that from the Black organizations, the word defund the police came from their decision of what to call it. Katie is right. It doesn't mean rip all the funding.
Right. No, I know that.
I know what it really means, but I'm saying
the Blacks have had reword it so we're more comfortable over white supremacy and various other things too. And we don't really have a right to reword what they brought forward. This was an argument I read. You know,
I would be the devil's advocate there and say that I think that's part of working. You want to call it reaching across the aisle, or working with other groups, or to come to terms that everybody agrees on what they mean. But if not everybody's in agreement on how they're interpreting it, maybe a different, more neutral word, and give them credit for the idea. But I'm
where we could talk as equals is true.
Yes, yes.
I think there are. It's not, oh, well, they'll just change it and then we'll like it, you know, kind of an attitude.
Well,
yeah. I had not thought of that until I read that. I thought, okay.
And we have had a huge history of going in and doing things our way.
Right.
And when we try to help them, we don't even ask them what they need, much less let them drive it.
True.
And so I understand the sentiment very much, and understand why there's an argument about it. But
yeah, it gets back to that white savior complex.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to move us into what will probably be our just a heads up, because this is the third one that I've gotten. Be very careful of accepting any friend requests from other members of TVUC, because I've gotten one from Jenna Mashburn, Bill Cherry, and I'm friends with all of them. So just don't accept any of those, I would say right now.
You mean somebody posing as? I didn't know.
Yeah, you can. It's Facebook accounts, especially if you don't use them a lot, they can get cloned, and basically, I mean, it'll look like someone that you know is just sending you a friend request. But one of the big giveaways is that if there's not a profile picture, or if there's like no friends. But yeah, I'm friends with Bill and Jenna, and I've just started getting a few of them coming across my alerts. But sorry for that digression. But just wanted to get into a little bit of this last section we're going to get into tonight, because I don't want to get too far into it, because it starts getting into some more of Knoxville's history. But just a little bit of background, and some of this information is in the book. This is just about pre-colonial times with the indigenous civilizations that were here, and just the idea that this place wasn't settled. I mean, there wasn't a civilization here. So around 12,000 years ago, human beings began to occupy 7 different areas, 3 of which were in the Americas. The Valley of Mexico in Central America, the South Central Andes Mountains, and Eastern North America. By the end of the 1500s Common Era, at about the time Columbus landed in the Caribbean, the total population of what we now call the Western Hemisphere was about 100 million. So, and
100 million. Wow, think about that.
Yep.
100 million wiped out for the most part.
And that's why, like, both with Blacks and Native Americans, the percentage that make up in the United States is so small, because we killed so many of them.
I mean, they had complex civilizations. I mean, what we call pathways, I mean, in trailblazing through the forest, that was their roads. I mean, it's not like we had to create them. And I mean, there was complex trading networks that went from place to place all throughout this continent, going down to South America. And by the time of the European invasions, indigenous people had occupied and shaped every part of the Americas, established extensive trade networks and roads, and were sustaining their population by adapting to specific natural environments. But they also adapted nature to human ends, which something we're not quite there yet. Native people left an indelible imprint on the land, with systems of roads that tied nations and communities together across the entire landmass. So, well, before we started talking about this, I mean, how much did you know about the civilizations and cultures that were here in the U.S. before the arrival of the Europeans?
So,
That I've read.
Yeah, some. I knew more about the Cherokee, but
Yeah. I didn't know a whole lot in detail, but my mom she studied cultural anthropology at UT, and she was very obsessed with learning a lot about Native cultures. And so as a young kid, helping her, edit her papers for college, I learned a lot kind of secondhand. So I knew that there was this history, but I think for me, the bigger eye-opening thing is just like realizing how completely our culture has just ignored it and like, just doesn't even want to look at
Yes.
Yep. I mean, a lot of the stuff I learned was from Thanksgiving. I mean, that was just, I mean, the Indians saved the Pilgrims, and just out of the goodness of their own hearts. And I don't know if he's still listening in or not, but I mean, it's a fond memory, but it's kind of, I don't think they have them anymore, and I hope they don't, because it would be the same thing as far as Washington Redskins. But when I was growing up, Indian guides.
my kids were in Indian Guide. Yes.
I was in them.
Yeah.
My dad was in it with me. So.
Yep.
And I mean, talk about some cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
So
What exactly were those?
it was kind of along the lines of Cub Scouts. I mean, I think maybe it was like pre-Cub Scouts, but it was where you'd get together and you'd have tribes. Like, it was a school thing. It was like a father-son. I don't think it was father-daughter. I think at that point.
No, they had Indian princesses also. Our daughter was in that. So, and they met at the Y. It was not school sponsored, but anyway.
Oh, is that like in that movie Man of the House with like Chevy Chase and?
I never saw it.
I think they're in like a version of that.
Maybe.
That rings a bell. I mean, but you dress up like, I mean, and I mean, and I'd have to go back and research, but I don't think it was very well researched by the group itself. But I mean, you wore headdresses, we didn't learn what those headdresses meant. I mean, it was just, that it was basically playing Indians. I mean, like I said, it's some fond memories, but it's one of those ones, it's just like, and that was only 40 years ago. So,
some of the older folks here, so I grew up in the 60s, and there was a lot more talk about Native people then, even if it was misappropriation in some ways, where there's just not that much anymore. And do you remember that commercial with the Native man standing on the
tear down his
he wasn't Native, actually.
It was for It was for environmental causes. Yes.
Yeah,
yes, I do.
Commercial which got to me, and it made an imprint on me. We don't see stuff like that anymore. There's nothing highlighting the Native American culture in a public way that I'm aware of. I don't know. I don't have it.
I was actually going to ask about that, because I feel like whenever I was young in the late 80s, early 90s, like there was like a movement of some sorts that was very, very culturally appropriative. But, I'm thinking like Dances with Wolves, and there was a lot of white interest in sort of retelling this story. But I guess in almost like, I don't want to say like a noble savage kind of way, but maybe kind of like that. And so I guess I haven't gotten that far in the book. I don't know if that is touched on in the book as part of the history, but I'm fascinated about how that played into the overall narrative.
I don't think that was in it.
I don't remember, but I'll tell you somebody who you might talk to about that, and I'm pretty sure you might talk. if anybody wants to go on a deeper dive, and they can get a hold of Carol Badeau over at Westside, that is the person to talk to. And she, I mean, just going back to what you're talking about as far as the play up in Cherokee, we were already in discussion about having a field trip to go up there, and having some cluster stuff where we discuss the book amongst ourselves and reaching out to the local tribes here. But that got a little bit derailed. So
Went to Cherokee, North Carolina.
you what?
One there.
Can't hear.
Oh yeah, I could. Oh wait, couldn't hear me.
Was it the
Kind of goes in and out.
COVID virus that derailed it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there was some plans to go, because I mean, this is well, I mean, General Assembly took place was supposed to take place in Providence this year, and this was supposed to be the big anniversary, but yeah, unfortunately things got a little bit derailed. So hopefully we'll be able to come back, because I would love for us to take some sort of trip up there, especially with
Up where?
Oh, Cherokee, sorry.
Cherokee. Well, the museum there is outstanding, and ironically,
Wait a minute. You come out Cherokee, North Carolina?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'm confused because it's not up there; it's over there.
Yep, sorry.
Well, you have to get up, go up to get over there.
I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a disappointment. It's going to be a disappointment because it has been so Christianized and so taken over by the dominant culture that you don't get an authentic experience unless you've got some backdoor connection.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is from working in that treatment facility that was based on a Native American philosophy. We went there, we camped, but our directors had connections with the elders. And it was the elders that came and spoke to us. The museums that you go to, it was a disappointment to me because I felt like they had sold out to the Christian missionaries.
That's why Carol was wanting to lead it, because she's got connections with the elders and stuff.
Well, I was very good friends with Jerry Wolf, who was one of the chief elders. He was at the dedication of the national park, the 75th celebration. But anyway, it was his wife who taught my mother to make Cherokee style baskets. But anyway, Jerry died last year, but he was an elder, and he was a docent in the museum, and I always went with him, and I took friends, and maybe it was because we were with Jerry. I don't know. I felt like the museum was really very well done, and they've improved it because of the money that they're getting from the casino over there. And it's sort of an ironic twist that they got, probably mostly Caucasian money to now, improve. They have a school now that teaches the language and the writing and lots of, and they have a health center for the first time. But anyway, the museum improved a lot. I don't know when.
I was there in the 90s. It was a long time.
Oh no, it's totally been redone, and I think it's really good. Yeah,
A little bit of justice there with the taking.
Yeah.
It is a poetic justice.
I like it.
Well, and kind of going back to what Devin was talking about, I mean, I don't remember there being an uphill in the 80s, 90s of talking about stuff. But unfortunately, I feel like so often these things, they shouldn't be a trend. They should be something we're talking about all the time. But so many things, they become and I think that's the concern of right now, the moment we're in, because those of us that are following the rules pandemic-wise, obviously we are talking about this, but as things start to open back up, are people just going to kind of forget everything, go back to normal, and just put a black square on Facebook or Instagram or whatever and be like, that's enough? And I think some people will do that. Hopefully the people in this group, we are not among them, sort of thing. But yeah, I think unfortunately social issues sometimes feel like they become trends when they shouldn't be.
Well, just ask the Gibsons. They've been involved in social issues for how many, your whole lives. It wasn't trendy. I don't know. I don't feel like it's a trendy thing, but I don't know. We're from different generations, so.
On that note, I would like to invite us to think about this. So when I did my pastoral pastoral care internship there. My second semester, I led a group in response to the trauma of the shooting.
Yeah.
And the delayed response that some people were having 5 years later. Mm-hmm. And my training for that, I went to Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia, where over a decade ago, they had a program called Coming to the Table, where they brought descendants of the slaves and slave owners to the table to talk about their life currently. And together they came up with ways to make reparations. And scholarships were set up. There were different things that were done. In my training with them, there's people doing the same thing with Native people in the upper Midwest. So I would like for us to start thinking about ways to do that here in the South as well. I'm not sure what it would look like, how it would unfold, but I would invite us to think about it. They're doing their trainings online now. I participated in, so the other thing that came out of the Healing Historical Harms group was, I'm sorry, Coming to the Table group was, we've got to heal the intergenerational trauma of this. And so the program that I went to was the pilot for the Healing Historical Harms. Yeah. So I plant that seed to hopefully think about doing more with it. And if anybody wants to go with me, I'm going to make a field trip to Uchee, Tennessee, the place I was talking about earlier, where there's a small cluster of the Uchee Indians that lived on this land are now living. Very small groups. If anybody wants to go with me to see what that looks like, it might not have anything to do with Native people now. It might just be the name of a town.
Yeah. That is interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, I was going to close this just real quick. I was just going to say, I mean, because I didn't want to get where we're at right now is we were about to go into Andrew Jackson and Knoxville and Tennessee in particular. So I didn't want to just kind of jump in and just kind of some of that stuff. So, but I appreciate y'all. I mean, I'm going to end it a little bit early tonight just because I don't want to just considering those two topics have some relevance to some of us here. So, yeah, just I've enjoyed talking with y'all tonight, and I survived the technical difficulties. So
smooth as silk.
So, and nothing was lit on fire. So that's always a plus too.
May your computer be healed.
So, but all right. Well, we will reconvene next Monday at 6:30.
Okay.
And we will continue. And I hope to see all y'all again next week.
One housekeeping thing. Will the link be the same, or?
Yes, you don't have it. It's the same link. If by some reason you lose it, just go ahead and go to the original reservation, and you'll get a new link. But yeah, everything will work the same for next week.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Yes. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
Good night.
Nice meeting you, Katie.
Nice meeting you, Katie.
Yes.
Katie, thank you for coming.
Bye. Good to see you, Angelina.
Good to